Hi, I'm Tatum and today we're diving into Shine's secret sex questions. I sent out a link to the Shine community welcoming any sex questions that you may have after a cancer diagnosis. And I'm joined today by Zoe. She is a psychosexual and relationship therapist and a member of Shine as well, which is lovely. And we're going to get into these questions because I personally have found some general information about sex quite hard. I felt like a little bit alienated by it. And general information can be amazing. But one of the things that one of the people from Shine sent in anonymously perfectly put how I felt that younger people are underrepresented with regard to sex and cancer. And when there is information about it, it's often for people in monogamous relationships. It doesn't necessarily touch on things like BDSM, group sex, polyamory, body image, gender. And that really summed up how I was feeling about sometimes this like very generic information that we get, which is why we have Zoe here.
Hi, Tatum. Thanks for having me.
So I want to ask you about that. Like, what is the tension between general sex information and specific questions for you?
You've really hit the nail on the head with what you were saying about different groups and different people. I think the main issue is that there just isn't enough information out there as it is for any sort of age group. You know, even if you were going to go with like heterosexual, something like really sort of generalized. So I think it does make it really difficult. Like, where does everybody else go and where do they get that information from? Cancer and sex is going to be very different if you are younger compared to being older. Not meaning that if you're older it's easier, but it's a completely like different life stage. It's going to be a completely different response to what's happening. So actually, you know, you need tailored information and you need support that is really specific to your sort of age group, for example.
Yeah, I think the first thing I ever went to about sex and cancer, I just felt like, oh my God, I don't want to hold my partner's hand and cuddle. You know, I love a cuddle, but aren't we talking about sex? Like, and there could have been really good advice in there, but it was like I didn't have an entry into it because it just didn't feel like it was speaking to me.
I think that's something that I felt myself going through my own cancer diagnosis, that a lot of what was being said, if any, wasn't really speaking to me at my age as a 30-year-old that was at
Yeah.
their like sexual peak having a great time, you know, and all of a sudden cancer's come along and is going to change everything. And I didn't feel like anything really was aimed at that and could understand what I was about to go through.
And you talk about that kind of sexual peak, it just made me think that I'd always read, even when I was 19, that 37 is a woman's sexual peak and 17 is a man's. I have no idea if it's true. Um, but then I felt sort of muted before I got there and really cheated out of this prime real estate that I had, built up in my mind. I'm imagining what sex real estate looks like. Can you tell me a little bit more about what was going on in your life when you got sick?
I was 35 and I was doing really well at work in a quite a high stressful job, but was doing really well. And I was dating and I was planning to, you know, do a bit more traveling, and everything was sort of like just going along, but going well. And all of a sudden, I then got this cancer diagnosis, which completely was just a shock. And as most people, no doubt, listening to this will understand how difficult it is to hear those words that you've got cancer. And it just basically felt like my whole life was turned upside down. But I really remember feeling like what you're describing, that, you know, I wasn't ready to like give up my sexuality
Hmm.
because cancer had come along. I was finding it really difficult because I was going to like different talks, you know, getting information while I was being diagnosed, and there was nothing really about sexuality, relationships, intimacy, or how I might manage that. But what I was being told was that I'm probably going to go into this medical menopause and it's going to be really awful and I'm probably not going to want to have sex. And that was it.
Right.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing from that is that it's almost like a bit of an afterthought, like, oh, a bit like, well, what can you expect? And that really came through with the questions that we received as well.
Of course, when you're diagnosed with cancer, it's really important that like there's survival and you do everything that you need to do to get better. But you know, as a young person, there's also so much in your life that's really important as a young person, and that might be like a relationship or dating. It might be having sex. It might be having all different kinds of sex, and that might be like a really big part of your identity as well as a person.
Yes.
And I think for me, it kind of felt like these things were an afterthought. Like the main thing here was to survive, and of course it is to survive, but it shouldn't be at the cost of all these other things that actually is what life is about. Someone being diagnosed with cancer at an older age who's maybe had their children and has been married for some time, I'm not saying they're not going to go through an awful time. Of course they are. But if you're a young person at the beginning of that journey where you're like looking to meet someone, or you're in the dating pool, or you're in a new relationship, or even just in a relationship, and that is all still to come, this is going to severely impact like not only your sex life, but also like your relationship and your intimacy and how you feel with each other and how you feel about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And what really drove me into really getting into sort of like sex therapy and cancer was the fact that this wasn't being spoken about anywhere. And I remember feeling really panicked that I was going to lose my sex drive, or my sex drive was going, because of course your body's in survival, your body's in like this fight mode. Sex isn't what you're thinking about, right? But at one point it's going to come back, or you'd like it to come back. It really became aware to me that no one was talking about this with me. There wasn't much information on it anywhere. And actually it worried me. And I thought, hang on, I've got like all these years of qualifications and I've trained to study this. I know how to re-engage my sex drive and my desire if I want to. What must everybody else be feeling right now if I'm feeling like this?
And so since getting your diagnosis, how has that been to kind of have your own experience and, like you said, like really draw on the work that you've been doing, and like you said, knowing things in theory and knowing there are some things that you can do, but then putting them into action? How has that been?
Yeah, it's been really difficult because initially, I was really worried, like where is my sex drive? Where is my libido? Like I didn't have any interest at all. And I think when you don't have any interest, you're then not inclined to sort of try and engage it because you don't have the interest, right? So I was really worried to start with. And then I started to put into action some of the things that I tell my own clients to do, just like basically reconnecting with my body and, my body needing time to feel safe. You go through all this prodding and cutting and poking and treatments and all these things that we all go through when we've had cancer. My body didn't feel safe and it needed to feel safe. And I think with time it did change. And that was really eye-opening for me. But I had to also like use the stuff that I tell everyone else to do. So yeah, it was a difficult time. It was a difficult time. But I think by also going through it has really helped me work with people that have experienced cancer, because it's not until I've gone through something like this that I'm like, I don't feel like I could have truly understood unless you've gone through something like this.
Yeah.
And often as a therapist, we are often empathizing and putting ourselves in people's shoes because that's part of our role, and we can effectively do a lot of work with people that way. But I don't know, there's something about going through cancer for me that is like, I don't feel I would have been as effective. Like, I think you need to go through it to know.
Yeah. It's like it is that deep knowing, not the theoretical knowing.
Yeah.
And it can seem somewhat straightforward, like just taking that example of libido, like, oh, so you want to increase your libido, do this, this, and this. And it's like, yeah, but I'm not interested, so how do I do that and that? And if I'm not interested and I'm forcing myself to do it, that feels weird, that feels uncomfortable, and then that feels scary, and actually my body doesn't need any more scary stuff, and I'm already maybe feeling broken. I don't want to think about it because it makes me feel more broken. And so it isn't just that there is X, Y, and Z that you can do, but how do you get to do the mental cartwheels
Yeah.
sometimes to be able to access that and incorporate it?
Exactly. It's not straightforward at all. And there are so many like different hurdles you've got to get through. It's not just physical, it's not just emotional, it's psychological. There is so much going on at a time like that.
So tell me, is there a top question? The thing that when people find out what you do, they take you into a corner and they're like, I have to ask. What what is like the number one thing that you're hearing from people?
I think the main thing is like sex drive. The
Mm,
main thing is people asking about sex drive and, is it normal that I don't have much of a sex drive after going through all of this? Or is it normal that my partner's sex drive is higher than my sex drive? Um, a lot around sex drive, and I think we have this like I think the media portrays this, and we have this sort of like culture where we think everybody's having like loads of sex
mm-hmm.
and having a really really great time. And if we're not doing that, then we're sort of like the odd ones out, or there's something wrong with us, or we're the only person in the world not doing it. And actually, there's a lot of people that are not having loads and loads of sex all the time, with or without cancer. Um, so I think it's just reassuring people that you're not necessarily defined by your sex life, but also that we recognize it's really important. It's really important to want to have a sex life and for it to be pleasurable and for it to be how you want it to be.
So kind of reigniting that spark when you're not feeling it. And there's, like you said, so many hurdles to that. So we're definitely going to get into that with some of the questions. What is the thing that you feel that people want to ask, but you don't get the questions a lot, but you have a feeling there's probably more questions that people find really challenging to reach out about?
I think there's often people that are into certain kinks that they might feel like, BDSM or other things that they might want to ask about, but feel like it comes with shame or stigma that they can't talk about these things, and it's, completely normal thing to engage in if that's something you enjoy. I think that's something that comes up, and also, something that I'm seeing a lot more in my practice is definitely like ethical non-monogamy and open relationships, and people having more sexual partners and being in multiple relationships and finding ways for that to work and actually really enjoying having that sort of like sexual freedom and understanding in their relationships or their partnerships. And that is definitely something that is coming up a lot more. And I think people often say that when they're even looking for a therapist, and I sort of do my intros, like, we just want to make sure like we're not going to be judged for needing to have this sort of lifestyle.
I mean, that's the thing about being diagnosed, is that we often talk on this podcast about these like really foundational sort of tectonic plates of our lives and our relationships shifting. Actually, often relationships are then we're looking through a new lens. And so for some people, it can be, actually, do I want to stay with this partner? Like, is this my person? Other people, and we've done episodes on it, get diagnosed and their partner isn't great and they break up, and then they're single maybe for the first time in a long time, and it's like, oh wow, like now I'm single with a cancer diagnosis. How do I manage this landscape? And so you've got these really big shifts of, okay, well, what am I doing with my life? What do I want? And of course, that's going to spill over then into, well, what kind of sex do I want? What kind of relationship do I want? And so it being a time where people are like, actually, do we want to try being poly? Do we want to, explore? Is often happening at the exact same time that all these other things are. How do you find people are navigating that shift?
It's a real time of like reevaluation that people go through after a cancer diagnosis, during a cancer diagnosis. I know myself, I went through a huge like reevaluation of everything in my life, and I feel like it just comes with the territory of it. And some of that is really positive, like what you're saying about like, what do we actually want from life? Like, what do I want from life? Like, what was I maybe putting up with that I'm not willing to put up with anymore? What was I lacking that actually I really want in my life and I don't have? What would I like to try that I've always maybe been too scared or had too much shame to try sexually that I would like to try? Suddenly there's this, for me especially, it was like, life's too short, like I knew that, but I really know it now, and I need to go out and enjoy myself. I've known people that have come out of like relationships, marriages with children, and have realized that actually their sexuality is changed, and or it was always maybe what it was, but now they feel like they can actually do something about it, or they want to do something about it. I've had friends that have gone into same-sex relationships following a cancer diagnosis. I know other people who have really like just experimented and just thought, do you know what, like I'm just gonna get out there and just try all the things that I never tried before and enjoy all the things I'm good. I know other people that are still really struggling, and that feels like so far away for them, and actually just trying to navigate the basics of getting back into like a sexual relationship is actually their goal, and it's really important.
Yeah. And it's quite nice to see the spectrum of stories, isn't it, and experiences. I remember listening to a podcast called Dying for Sex, and it was about a woman in her 30s who realized that she actually didn't want to be in this relationship. What she wanted was a fuck ton of sex, and she went out and had it. And that's not often a story that we're told. Again, kind of thinking about, well, cradle each other, caress,
Yeah, hold
and,
hands.
yeah, and look into each other's eyes. You're like, oh, like, no, that's lovely and amazing and valuable, absolutely. But some people are going to want to feel a bit more adventurous. And it's like how to get that information out that everywhere on this is kind of normal and also has its challenges. So I think it's a really good time to get into those shine secret questions.
Let's do it.
I'm a 43-year-old woman, and I can't tell if I'm suffering with menopause, perimenopause, or the side effects from chemotherapy, but it hurts to have sex. And I also seem to have an allergic reaction to lubricant. The GP said it could be either. So it's really hard to get back to sex between treatments. So that's between treatments and like not knowing what is a side effect of what.
I think it's really difficult not knowing what is going on there, but some things that might be helpful. I would always recommend a water-based lube, and you can get lubricants that, if someone's having a reaction to lubricants, there's some that are like completely like plant-based and free of all chemicals and things. So it's really important to pick firstly like a really good lubricant. One that I would recommend is the water-based lubricant by Yes Yes Yes, because it's got absolute. I mean, I'm not affiliated with them. I don't get paid to say this. It's just genuinely one that I really like using and always recommend. And it's got no bad anything in it. So that might be something really good to start with. Thinking about like pause, or if it is chemotherapy side effects, it's going to be a really sort of difficult time because your body's going to be going through a lot. So I think one, it's just really important to just be really kind to yourself and it's self-compassion is so important. It's knowing that like you're going through a lot, your body's going through a lot. It might not be functioning how it was right now. It doesn't mean it won't again in the future, but it's just giving that sort of time and space and compassion. But something else that can also help with painful sex, so vagina like moisturizers can be really helpful, especially if things feel quite dry and tight. Again, yes, do a really great vaginal moisturizer that I often recommend to people, and I've actually used myself, and it's really, really great. Another thing that I can suggest is for women that usually have sexual pain, sometimes dilating can be really helpful, and that is just basically to help the muscles and help build your confidence. So you can get a really small dilator and lots of lube and just use it, insert it, just to help build your confidence and getting used to like, what does my vagina feel like, what does my vulva feel like, where is there pain, where isn't there pain, is there, it's kind of getting to know your current normal at that time, and what positions might work well or what areas hurt more than others. So I think it is about just like getting to know and learning your body, learning about your body.
There was something that you said about safety as well at the beginning. And we often think of it in terms of stress, right? We know that when we're really stressed out, some people will drink more, some people will eat more, some people will forget to eat, right? Like we all have different responses. So it's definitely not like a one size fits all. But a lot of people don't think about sex when they're really stressed out because the body is trying to prioritize the things that are really important. And so when we're we often know that when we're stressed we often get a dry mouth, but we don't think that when we're stressed we're going to get dry down there, right?
Yeah.
And our body is trying to focus on the big thing.
Yes.
And less non-essential functions. So I'm wondering, as part of that, like if there's anything that's like deeply relaxing and kind of thinking about like in the nicest possible way. I used to be a massage therapist, so this pops into my mind. But like what makes you drool? Because that's like the opposite, right? Really good night's sleep often eludes us after cancer, but actually like is there a way to like get a little bit more rest? Is there a way to that you find like, oh my God, yes, like I'm salivating at the idea of that level of relaxation is a really good sign that your nervous system responsible for rest is turning back on. Yeah, it doesn't have to be like a really big massage or anything, but like what can we do to support that spark?
Definitely. It's so important that we relax our nervous systems, and you're right, the body is in survival, it's in protecting the body in every way it needs to. It's not thinking about all these other things like libido and sex drive. These are often the first things to go out of the window when we're really stressed out or going through a lot. So I think it is really important to think about relaxation and calming the nervous system as well. This can be things like deep breathing. It can be yoga or stretching. It might be just like burning a nice candle that you really love the smell of and it really makes you feel relaxed. Anything to sort of really get the body into some kind of like, not in like a nervous alert state, just relax. That can definitely help with pain. And we know that actually like mindfulness is really helpful when it comes to one, increasing desire, but two, like the more relaxed we are, the better sex we're gonna have. So again, mindfulness, any type kind of mindfulness can be really helpful.
The more relaxed we are, the wetter we can get. Sometimes we think about mindfulness and we're like, oh yeah, that would be nice, but like we're not necessarily thinking how it can like functionally, like literally make things more comfortable.
If that isn't happening, just use loads of lube. Like, don't be shy with lube. Like, I say to people, like, the wetter the better. Just use as much as possible. Keep topping it up. Keep applying it. It's completely safe and fine to use as much lube as possible.
Yeah, and I also heard it's really fun to combine them.
Yeah,
Different oil-based and water-based, make a whole slip and slide. Like it's, just like go to town. The other thing that you said that I really enjoyed was becoming curious about what works for you now. Because of all the different hormonal chemical changes, stress changes, like you said, your body being prodded in so many different ways, that actually what you need can be really different to what it was before in both ways. So I've heard of some women actually needing more stimulation than they used to have before. Thinking about it as a discovery process
Yes.
is quite a nice way in.
Yes, exactly. It's like, imagine having a blank canvas that you're about to do a painting on, and you don't know what this painting is going to look like or what the outcome is going to be, but you're going to explore with all these different colours of paints. It's exactly like that. Just, it is literally like rediscovering your body and looking and seeing like what feels pleasurable, what doesn't, what did, what didn't. Like, yeah, does something need to be more firmer touch now? Does it need to be lighter touch? Like, you know, really this self-discovery of getting to explore yourself all over again.
And there was a question that we had from someone who enjoyed bondage,
Mm-hmm.
and she had a very specific question that, like, absolutely a medical professional could give a more full answer to, which was, when you have your lymph nodes removed, is it going to affect it if I am then engaging with the bondage that I used to on that arm? How much pressure and what should I watch out for? And thinking about that question made me think about, like, what does it take to find someone to ask
Yeah.
that question to? And also, do you disclose, or are there other ways of saying, oh, I have another activity where I wear quite tight outfits? I have a cardigan, it's got very tight cuff. Is that okay to wear?
First, I think it's a great question. So thank you to whoever submitted that question. I definitely think that's something that someone medical needs to answer. But you know what we could be saying is, if you don't want to disclose that that's what you do, you know, you could ask questions like, what can't I do with this arm now that I've had my lymph nodes removed? How much pressure can I have on this arm? Is there anything I should be wearing if pressure was to be put on my arm, or if something was to feel tight? From my knowledge, a lot of it is about risk of infection. So it's more thinking about, like, you know, if there were to be cuts or anything like that. But I think it is just asking those questions of, yeah, you know, how much pressure can I have on this arm? Is there anything I can or can't do with this arm now that I've had lymph nodes removed? How does my arm differ to my other arm that hasn't had any lymph nodes removed? Like, even if you asked a really broad question like that to, you know, to a doctor or to your team, hopefully that should give you the answers that you need.
If there was something, like, in the meantime, before being able to get the answer to those questions, is there kind of a different approach to something that you really love and you're not sure if you should be partaking in it? Where does that kind of sex uncertainty, like, how does that leave us feeling?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think someone should necessarily stop engaging in like BDSM or bondage if that's what they like, but maybe it's thinking about like where on the body you do that, instead of like using that side of the body or the affected area. You know, do you do it on like legs or bum or somewhere else? I think it's important to like not do something that you really enjoy and that feels part of you or you feel connected to, but it's just being aware of keeping yourself safe medically, physically at the same time, and just thinking about other ways of engaging in the thing that you really like.
Because I think this idea of sort of uncertainty, this lack of information, and the effect of that uncertainty came up with another question where it was a partner. They were told a little bit of information about sex, which was, do wear a condom, because when the partner was going through treatment, that it could potentially affect his sperm. And so there was a nervousness when using the condom of, what does it mean if it splits? And how do you hold that uncertainty, but you don't want your partner to feel that there's been a change?
I work with a lot of couples, and I think in cancer, uncertainty is a huge part, because there is so much happening that you don't know what the outcome is going to be, or you're not really understanding or sure of what's going on. Things happen fast and quickly. When working with couples, cancer or not, I think it's really important to communicate and just to share how you feel. And I think, often we don't want to hurt our partner, or we don't want to say something that is going to like upset them, or make them feel bad, but actually that leaves like big room for like, there's a space there that then the other person doesn't really know what the other person's feeling, and then that can lead to assumption, and that often causes so much more damage than actually just saying, this is how I'm feeling right now, or I'm not sure about this, what do you think we should do together, or what do you think about this. It can be really difficult, and it can be really hard to have those conversations because your partner's maybe going through so much, and you're like, I don't want to make things worse, or I don't want to add to what's going on. But actually, I think openness and communication actually builds intimacy and brings people closer to connection, and can be really helpful.
And it's possible that the partner's also feeling nervous about it, but maybe doesn't want to say anything because doesn't want it to be weird. And having
Definitely.
been the one not knowing what's coming out of your pores, that your partner is around, and what they're exposed to, it is in your mind. And actually what you were saying is kind of getting it out there. Just, how is it feeling for you? Have you thought about what happens if it breaks? There can be a guilt already, and that can be exacerbated by like trying to be normal.
And this doesn't help like relaxation, right? We're talking about being relaxed, and so if you're already going in with like all this stuff you're holding on to, a lot of the couples I work with, I do like an assessment process where I see a couple together and then I see them both separately, and then I bring them back together and they stay together after that. And often what is happening is that this is exactly what's happening. Both are holding on to like assumptions of the other. And they're often both sat there thinking exactly the same thing, but they're not communicating it and they're not sharing it, but they're both holding on to it. And then actually, when we come together and do couples work and it all sort of comes out, it's like a big relief for them. And it's like, oh, actually, like you're thinking what I'm thinking, and I didn't realize that, and I'm worrying about that, and you're telling me I don't need to worry about that. And it's really, it's a real privilege to see that sort of like moment where things start to like, the communication comes in and things start to improve, and the realization of like, oh, we're both sat here worrying silently about something that if we'd have just communicated about, we could have solved this a long time ago. So yeah, I think it's so important.
Yeah, and often that can happen in really caring relationships,
Yes.
actually, because both people are like, oh, I want to do right by you, and I think this is the right thing, but it's causing, there's already uncertainty because there is a real need to know more information, but it's then amplified by the reactions
Yes.
to it. And if you've got two people not communicating, you can really see how quickly that becomes a tricky situation.
Yeah.
And thinking about that idea of perception, there was another question that we had, basically saying, I don't have nipples anymore, I don't feel like a woman. And that perception of ourselves, but then the perception that somebody else might have. And if you have someone coming to you going, I don't feel like a woman anymore, or I don't feel like a man anymore, where do you begin to work with that?
Yeah, I think, initially it's just acknowledging that that's how you feel right now, and that's okay. It might not feel okay, but it's okay. Like your body's just gone through a huge trauma. And, this isn't the body that it's not the body you're used to. You've been with your body for however many years, and then you wake up one day from your operation, and all of a sudden your body's completely changed. Some of it's been amputated and it looks completely different. I think it's about just, again, this self-compassion of, it's okay that I feel like this right now. I have just been through A, B, C, all of this stuff. It's been really traumatic. So I think one, it's sort of like the validation that, it's okay that you feel this way. And I think two, it's recognizing that it is going to take time. It's going to take time to get used to your new body. It's not what you know. It's not what you've been with all your life, and all of a sudden you've got this new part that doesn't look how you thought it would look, or doesn't look in your, in our own ideas of what a woman should look like or a man should look like. There's all this sort of like societal pressure of what we're supposed to look like, and it's just really working with like patience and time and kindness.
Yeah. One of the things that I found in that situation that was helpful for me was thinking about other people in a similar situation, because I was really hard on myself and I felt really broken. But when I looked at some other friends of mine with cancer, I didn't look at them and go, "You're broken. No one's going to want you."
Yeah.
I looked at them and were like, "Oh, you're amazing. Like, someone would be lucky to date you." And that's, scars or nipples or no nipples, like, that wouldn't be what I would be thinking about someone else. But we're so hard on ourselves. And how we feel about ourselves, like you said, is really important. But how someone else might see us sometimes can be reassuring. In like, could I look at myself the way my friend might look at me?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really great, Tatum. It's really important to think about that, because I remember after mine, I was, really struggled with like the changes in my body. And I think for me, I was like, my way around it, I think, with how I ended up processing it was like, look what my body has done for me to get me through this. Like, this body I have now, yes, it's different, yes, it's changed, but it has got me through. It has done so much to keep me alive, to keep me well, to keep me where I am now. And I think there was some like deep appreciation that came from that helped me love my body and look at it through that lens. I think it is really important to talk to other people, especially like what Shine offers, that you can speak to other young people that have all been through cancer, often been through, of course, not the same experiences, but have the same sort of afterthoughts and are dealing with what we're talking about now, and actually talking to other people. And, someone might be like, well, I wouldn't care if you had nipples or not. Like, that is the last thing I'm thinking of when, like, I want to be with you, or I'm really into you, or want to have sex with you, and of course that's something that we might carry because our bodies change. But actually, you're right, what other people are often thinking about, and that it's not these things that we are so concerned and worried about.
Yeah. And it's holding space for that, as well as what you were saying, like just honoring, like, absolutely, this is how you're feeling.
Yeah.
There's a word I remember sometimes, like the story rather than the specific. So do I remember the specific word? No. But the story around it was that in Sanskrit there is an expression which is, I hear what you're feeling right now and I acknowledge that that may change,
Yeah.
but it's in a word.
Yeah.
And I love the sentiment of that, because there is this hold, especially when it's something really uncomfortable and what you want for someone. You can't rush to the next place, but holding space,
Yeah.
for that change. And I think especially around sex, like, if we're thinking about it as like how we connect, we can't connect by ignoring how we feel. And I think when people get the advice, oh, come on, just get on with it, which doctors will say, even if you're not feeling it, use it or lose it, that actually that pushing through that, like, can lead to more of a dissociation, and actually isn't about connecting, rather than creating an environment, whether that be on your own, like finding curiosity, an environment in terms of connection with your partner, actually having some of those conversations about how you're feeling. to create that ultimate connection that comes through sex, whether that's with yourself, whether that's with many partners. I think a lot of the advice sometimes feels that it doesn't necessarily like really hold what you just did so beautifully, that yes, this is how you're feeling.
A huge part of therapy, being a therapist, being in therapy myself, is somebody holding that space for you. Because you might not have a space in your life where that is being held, right? And often in cancer, like we know and people know listening, there is so much going on, right? There is no space. There is no space. And it's, something that I've really learned through my own cancer experience is that, two things can exist at the same time. That's something that I've really found, that, in one hand, I am so grateful that I am cancer free and in remission, and my body did what it did, and the doctors did what they did, and everyone helped me. But I am also like, at the same time, like really upset and angry that this happened to me, and that my life has changed so much to how it was before, and that I have to like live with that now. But this gratitude and, anger or upset, they can both exist. They can both live and sit together. And I think that's the same with a lot of things, that you can feel, like you said, you can feel one way now. It does not mean you are always going to feel that way. And sometimes you can't hold that space of I'm going to feel differently. You're so in it that you don't feel like I'm ever going to be able to feel different. This is how it's going to be forever. And sometimes you need another person to hold that space for you, that, do you know what, you can't hold this right now, but I'm going to hold it here for you. And I'm going to remind you of it at time to time, that it is here. And that, it can be different. And sometimes you really need that, whether it's a therapist or a friend or a professional or, whoever. I think it's just really important, because I think that is where we end up being really hard on ourselves, because we think like, well, this is it now. This is how it is. And just to add something else you said about, people that say like, if you don't use it, you lose it. Like, there's different ways to like use it. Use it doesn't mean that you have to push through and force yourself and be in pain and do something that you really don't want to do, because all that is going to do is create another really traumatic experience. And actually, who wants to have sex if that's how sex is? No one wants to go back to that. No one wants to engage with that. And the body will protect you from that. The body is clever. Our bodies are going to be like, no, I'm not doing that. That was awful. And so it's just keeping in mind that actually it can be things like just gently exploring yourself, just looking in the mirror. It might be just, touching your body and seeing what feels nice, what doesn't. It doesn't have to be that you've got to have like full-blown sexual intercourse and it's got to be how it was before and you've got to push yourself through. I very much advocate for pleasure. And sometimes we have to find pleasure in different ways when we can't do what we were able to do before, which might not be forever, but might be for so long. And it's really important to just like, what feels good? That's the key to go with.
And knowing, because we did have questions about vaginal atrophy, and you mentioned about dilators, is that there are medical professionals in this field, and it is something that you can request. I know there can be really long waiting periods, but it is part, like, sex is part of your health. It is sexual health.
Yes.
And if it is really painful, that it is something that can be looked at. There are things that can be done, and
Definitely.
And it can reverse. As someone who could not do anything themselves, it felt like broken glass. It was extremely painful and it took a while. I felt like, oh my, just like something was just so wrong with me and there was no hope. And then to find the right professional, find out there is hope. And I've had amazing sex since then, right? It has resuscitated. I used to call, like, when I was having sex, I was like, I think I need some therapy. I need some resuscitation. So making it kind of fun. But it started with, how could I connect to that part of my body with zero pressure?
Yes.
And the nurse said, even if it's just get a really good vibrator and a book and
Yes.
read, just to even start that mind
Exactly.
connection with no expectation. You're not trying for an orgasm, just to
Yeah.
start it off.
Yeah, I think this non-goal orientated is so important, for men and for women, especially with like sexual pain or unreliable erections. I work a lot with women that have sexual pain. I run a group for it 3 times a year with a colleague, and this exactly what you said, Tatum. Like, it is just like dipping your toe in and just seeing, like, it might be like some erotica, audio erotica you listen to. It might be like reading a book. It might be, like you said, a small vibrator. Sometimes with the women I work with, even if they're not able to like actually dilate, I'm like, just put it at the entrance. Just leave the dilator at the entrance. Like, you don't need to put it in. You don't have to do anything. Just leave it at the entrance. And I think that's what's really important. It's knowing that like there is help out there, and 100% it can get better. And I think you asked me at the beginning, like, what is the one of the most things that I hear, and actually you've reminded me that one of the most things that I hear is like, I am broken. There is something wrong with me.
Mm.
And there isn't. These women, these people, they're not broken. There isn't anything wrong with them. They feel like that, but there isn't. And there is hope out there. Things can get better.
Yeah. And sometimes it's finding the right product, sometimes it's finding the right professional. And sometimes while you're figuring all of that, it's knowing, there are psychosexual therapists like yourself out there. Relationships are immensely complicated. Sex is immensely complicated at the best of times, let alone when there's so much going on. So if someone's sitting at home going, oh my God, I have that question. Oh my God, I have another question. Maybe I could call someone like this? Like, if someone's thinking about seeing someone like you to find out more, what should they expect from a first session?
Like, I would always advise people to work with psychosexual therapists that are registered in the UK with the COSRAP body. So that's the College of Sex and Relationship Therapists, and that just means that I'm registered with them, and it just means that we've gone through specific training that's at a certain standard, and we've proven that we can work as therapists in this area. So firstly, that's really important that you find somebody who's had verification, like, and is on a register. And what I also would say is, a lot of therapists, I do this, I offer like a free 15-20 minute consultation. And I would say, like, book in with like a few therapists that you like the sound of. And if they offer that, take them up on it, because you need to know that you feel like, I could open up to this person. And of course, right, it's going to be really difficult in 15 or 20 minutes to know how that's going to go. But you can get a vibe in that time. And I think ultimately, like, most people that have gone into this field of, there's not many of us. We're a very small, niche, specialized group of therapists. I think there's something like only 700 in the whole of the UK. They're going to have some passion and some level of understanding and non-judgmental, the fact that they've even gone into this sort of area of work. Everyone has a profile, and they might be talking about, like, on mine it says like, I work with people that have had cancer. I've had my own cancer diagnosis. So you can find, usually people put what they're working with and what their sort of speciality is or interests are.
I think of myself as a pretty open person, but I had thought about it and was like a little nervous, even though I'm someone that doesn't have a lot of filters and I generally give a lot of information. But there was something about that, because therapy, it can be quite intense, and when you're facing something that perhaps has been a harder thing to carry, it can feel daunting. And I think that anything that takes away that dauntingness, like, okay, this is how I find them, this is what I'm looking for, and being able to say, like, maybe like in that introduction, this is where I'm at, and see
Yeah.
what that response is. But if you have more questions, me and Zoe are going to be doing a workshop at Shine Connect, which is our conference and the only conference in the UK for adults in their 20s, 30s, and 40s with cancer. And we will be taking more questions into the conference and doing a session there. So if you're like, oh my God, I need more sex questions answered, get in touch. Head over to shinecancersupport.org. You can find out about the conference, come along. It will be in London. You have more questions, you want to do another episode like this, Zoe, come back, because I think we have a lot more questions.
I feel like I could talk to you all day about this, Tatum.
I know. So we might be doing a part 2 to this. So let us know, get in touch. Thank you so much, Zoe, for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Tatum. It's been wonderful.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tatum.
And thank you to Radio Facilities for sponsoring our podcast. Till next time. Bye.